In the bustling streets of downtown Boston, where old money and modern ambitions collided, Mrs. Patricia Chen's life was about to take an unexpected turn. The 45-year-old real estate mogul had everything money could buy: a penthouse overlooking the harbor, a collection of rare art, and a reputation that preceded her in every boardroom. Yet, beneath the polished exterior lay a wound that 15 years of success couldn't heal. It was during her routine morning coffee at her favorite corner cafe when she first saw the little girl. The child couldn't have been more than 5, wearing a pink backpack almost too big for her small frame, holding her mother's hand as they waited at the crosswalk. Something about the way the little girl tucked her hair behind her ear made Patricia's coffee cup freeze midway to her lips. The gesture was so familiar, so hauntingly similar to a memory she had tried to bury. 15 years ago, Patricia had lost her 2-week-old daughter in what became the darkest chapter of her life. The baby had vanished from the hospital nursery, leaving behind a devastated mother and a case that went cold despite the best efforts of law enforcement. The investigators had called it a professional job: no fingerprints, no witnesses, just a carefully orchestrated disappearance that left Patricia's world in shambles. The sight of the little girl at the crosswalk awakened something in Patricia. She found herself returning to the cafe every morning, ordering the same vanilla latte, sitting at the same table, waiting. Her assistant, Li Wei, noticed the change in her behavior but knew better than to question it. After all, he had been with her through the worst of times, watching her channel her grief into building her empire. 3 weeks of morning vigils passed before Patricia saw them again. This time, she noticed more details: the little girl's distinctive walk, the shape of her eyes, the way she gestured when she talked. But it was the birthmark, a small crescent-shaped mark behind her left ear, visible when she reached up to adjust her backpack, that made Patricia's heart stop. It was identical to the one her baby had. The mother and daughter duo entered a small bookstore across the street. Patricia watched as they disappeared inside, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. "Get me everything you can on the family that runs that bookstore," she instructed her private investigator, a man who had helped her vet countless business deals over the years. Within days, Patricia learned that the bookstore belonged to Mrs. Rose Wong, a widow who had moved to Boston 5 years ago with her daughter, Amy. The timing, the age, the physical similarities, everything aligned with the puzzle pieces in Patricia's mind. But it was the discovery that Rose had no hospital records of Amy's birth that turned Patricia's suspicions into certainty. The legal battle that followed sent shockwaves through the community. Patricia's lawyers filed for an emergency hearing, presenting circumstantial evidence and requesting DNA testing. Rose Wong, caught completely off guard, found herself defending her motherhood in front of stern-faced judges and curious reporters who camped outside her modest bookstore. The local Chinese-American community rallied around Rose, organizing fundraisers to help with her legal fees. They knew her as the kind-hearted woman who hosted weekly story times for neighborhood children, who kept her small business alive through impossible odds after her husband's passing. To them, the idea that she could have stolen a baby seemed absurd. But Patricia was relentless. Each night, she would sit in her empty penthouse, staring at the only photo she had of her baby, a grainy hospital Polaroid showing a tiny hand clutching her finger. The memory of that touch had sustained her through 15 years of searching, of hoping, of never giving up. The media circus grew larger with each passing day. Television crews set up their equipment across from the bookstore, hoping to catch a glimpse of the little girl at the center of the storm. Online forums buzzed with theories and debates, while social workers expressed concern about the psychological impact on Amy, who had been pulled out of kindergarten to avoid the attention. Rose's lawyer, a pro bono representative from a community legal aid organization, argued passionately about the trauma being inflicted on an innocent child. "My client has birth certificates, vaccination records, and 5 years of documented life in this community," he stated during a preliminary hearing. Mrs. Chen's wealth doesn't give her the right to destroy a family based on a resemblance and a birthmark. But Patricia's legal team had uncovered more discrepancies. Rose's late husband had no living relatives who could corroborate the pregnancy or birth. The small town in California where Rose claimed Amy was born had suffered a devastating fire that destroyed many public records from that period. Each revelation added weight to Patricia's case, even as it tore at the fabric of two women's lives. As the court date for DNA testing approached, both mothers found themselves trapped in a nightmare neither could have imagined. Rose spent her nights holding Amy close, telling her stories about her father, reinforcing memories of their life together. Patricia haunted the halls of her penthouse, touching the walls of the nursery she had never dismantled, praying that this time, her search would end differently. The story captured the imagination of the public, not just because of its dramatic elements, but because it touched on universal fears and hopes. Parents held their children tighter, thinking about how fragile the bonds of family could be. Others questioned how far they would go if they believed their child was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Local newspapers began digging into similar cases across the country, uncovering a pattern of sophisticated baby trafficking operations that had targeted hospitals in the early 2000s. Expert psychologists appeared on morning shows, discussing the complex emotions involved in cases of disputed parentage and the lasting impact on children caught in the middle. As the first part of this saga drew to a close, the city of Boston held its breath. Two mothers, two versions of truth, and one little girl who would soon learn that the story of her life was more complicated than any tale in her mother's bookstore. The DNA test results would arrive in 3 days, promising to answer questions that had haunted Patricia for 15 years, while threatening to unravel everything Rose had built. The weight of justice hung in the balance, as did the fate of a child who went to sleep each night unaware that her tomorrow might look very different from her yesterday. In the quiet hours before dawn, two women lay awake in different parts of the city, each holding on to their truth with the fierce determination that only a mother could understand. The morning of the DNA test results dawned with an unusual quietness over Boston. The media crews, who had become a constant fixture outside the courthouse, set up their equipment with subdued efficiency. Inside the building, the tension was palpable as both families arrived through separate entrances to avoid confrontation. Patricia arrived first, her usual confident stride replaced by nervous energy. Her normally immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of strain, a slightly crooked necklace, a loose strand of hair that escaped her typical tight bun. Her team of lawyers surrounded her like a protective shield, but their presence did little to calm her racing heart. 20 minutes later, Rose Wong entered through the back entrance, clutching Amy's small hand as if it were a lifeline. The little girl, dressed in her favorite yellow dress, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. She had stopped asking why they kept coming to this big building with its endless corridors and stern-faced adults. Instead, she pressed closer to her mother, her free hand holding tight to the worn stuffed rabbit she'd had since she could remember. Judge Eleanor Martinez, known for her careful handling of sensitive family cases, had ordered the proceedings to be closed to the public. As the families filed into her chambers, she observed the little girl at the center of the storm. Amy's eyes darted between the adults, trying to make sense of why everyone seemed so tense. The DNA results lay in a sealed envelope on the judge's desk. The room fell silent as she picked it up, the sound of paper tearing seemed deafening in the quiet chamber. Patricia gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white. Rose pulled Amy onto her lap, pressing her face into her daughter's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Before I read these results," Judge Martinez began, her voice steady and calm, "I want to remind everyone that regardless of what this envelope contains, our primary concern must be the well-being of this child." She paused, making eye contact with both women. "The transition, if necessary, will be handled with extreme care and professional guidance." The judge unfolded the paper, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and Amy's quiet humming as she played with her rabbit's ears, oblivious to the life-changing moment unfolding around her. "The DNA results show." Judge Martinez paused, her experienced eyes scanning the document thoroughly, a 99.9% match between Mrs. Patricia Chen and Amy Wong. The words fell like heavy stones into still water, creating ripples that would change lives forever. Rose's sob broke the silence, a sound so raw and painful that even Patricia's lawyers looked away. Amy, startled by her mother's cry, turned in her lap, placing her small hands on Rose's cheeks. "Mama, don't cry," she whispered, wiping away tears with clumsy fingers. Patricia sat frozen, her victory suddenly feeling hollow as she watched the scene before her. This was what she had fought for, what she had dreamed of for 15 years, but the reality was far more complicated than any scenario she had imagined. The little girl, her daughter by blood, was a stranger who was currently trying to comfort the only mother she had ever known. Judge Martinez quickly took control of the situation, outlining a transition plan that would span several weeks. A child psychologist, Dr. Mei Zhang, would work with Amy to help her understand and cope with the changes ahead. Both mothers would need to cooperate for the sake of the child's emotional well-being. As they left the courthouse through separate exits, the media exploded with activity. News of the DNA results spread rapidly, and public opinion, which had been divided, began to shift. Questions about Rose's involvement in the original kidnapping arose, though she maintained her innocence, claiming she had adopted Amy through what she believed was a legitimate agency. The investigation into Rose's past intensified. Detective James Cooper, who had worked the original kidnapping case 15 years ago, came out of retirement to help piece together the missing links. The adoption agency Rose mentioned had vanished, leaving behind a trail of similar cases across 3 states. In the days that followed, Amy began her sessions with Dr. Zhang in a cheerful office filled with toys and art supplies. The psychologist used play therapy to help the little girl process the complex situation. Through dolls and drawings, Amy expressed her confusion and fear, though she remained remarkably resilient. The first supervised visit between Patricia and Amy took place in this same office. Patricia, who could command boardrooms without breaking a sweat, found herself nervous about meeting her daughter properly for the first time. She brought a gift, a delicate silver bracelet with a crescent moon charm, matching Amy's birthmark. The meeting was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Amy was polite but reserved, accepting the gift with a shy "thank you," while keeping Dr. Zhang's hand firmly in hers. Patricia tried to bridge the gap with stories about her own childhood, discovering that Amy shared her love of butterflies and chocolate ice cream. Meanwhile, Rose's life began to unravel. The bookstore, once a beloved community hub, stood empty as she focused on the legal battles ahead. Criminal investigations into the adoption agency revealed a sophisticated trafficking ring, but Rose's involvement remained unclear. Her neighbors and customers rallied around her, organizing protests and sharing stories of her kindness and dedication as a mother. The case sparked nationwide discussions about adoption reform and the need for better safeguards against trafficking. Legal experts appeared on news shows, debating the complexities of cases where both mothers were arguably victims of the same criminal enterprise. As the second part of this saga drew to a close, Amy's world continued to expand and contract in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. She now had 2 homes, her familiar bedroom above the bookstore with its wall of storybook characters, and a new room in Patricia's penthouse with a view of the harbor. She carried her stuffed rabbit between these 2 worlds, its worn fur collecting the tears of both mothers as they struggled to find a way forward. The story had revealed its next layer, but the questions it raised were far from answered. How does one measure motherhood? Can love be quantified by DNA or years of bedtime stories? As Boston's summer turned to fall, these questions hung in the air, waiting for time and truth to provide their answers. The crisp autumn air swept through Boston's streets as the complex situation continued to unfold. The transition plan, carefully crafted by Dr. Zhang and approved by Judge Martinez, was now in its 3rd week. Amy spent alternating days between both homes, her stuffed rabbit, now named Mr. Hoppy, serving as her constant companion through these changes. Rose's bookstore had reopened, though with reduced hours. The community's support remained unwavering, with regular customers making special trips just to buy books and offer encouragement. The store's reading corner, where Amy used to spend hours listening to stories, sat quietly waiting for her return. Rose kept her daughter's favorite books dusted and ready, clinging to the routine even on days when Amy wasn't there. Patricia, meanwhile, was learning the intricate dance of motherhood. Her corporate efficiency helped her master the practical aspects, scheduling, meal planning, creating a child-friendly environment, but the emotional nuances proved more challenging. She found herself studying Amy's interactions with Rose during supervised visits, noting the natural flow of their relationship, the inside jokes, the unspoken understanding between them. One particularly significant afternoon, Amy was helping Patricia arrange flowers in the penthouse when she suddenly asked, "Why didn't you find me sooner?" The question, delivered with the direct simplicity of a child, caught Patricia off guard. She sat down on the plush carpet, patting the space beside her, and for the first time, shared her story without thinking about legal implications or adult complications. "I never stopped looking for you," Patricia explained, her voice soft. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every single day, I wondered where you were and if you were happy." Amy listened intently, her small fingers tracing patterns on Mr. Hoppy's ears. "I looked everywhere, just like the mama bear in your favorite story who searched the whole forest for her cub." This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Amy began asking more questions, showing curiosity about her birth mother's life. She was particularly fascinated by the old photographs Patricia shared, especially ones from when Patricia was a little girl herself. The physical resemblance between them became a source of wonder rather than confusion for Amy. However, the legal proceedings continued to cast a shadow over these tender moments. Detective Cooper's investigation had uncovered troubling details about the adoption agency that had placed Amy with Rose. A network of fake documents, falsified records, and suspicious money transfers painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal operation. Rose's involvement remained a matter of intense scrutiny. Her bank records showed a substantial payment to the agency, but her lawyer argued this was consistent with normal adoption fees. The investigation revealed that several other families had also been deceived by the same organization, believing they were participating in legitimate adoptions. The stress began to show on Rose. Despite her best efforts to maintain normalcy, her hands shook slightly when reading bedtime stories, and dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her only solace came from Amy's continued affection. The little girl, with the remarkable adaptability of children, had developed a way of comforting both her mothers without fully understanding the complexity of their situation. Dr. Zhang observed that Amy was processing the changes in her own unique way. During therapy sessions, she began creating elaborate stories using dolls, often featuring a character with 2 homes and 2 families. Through art therapy, she drew pictures of herself with both mothers, always including Mr. Hoppy as a bridge between her 2 worlds. Patricia, recognizing the toll the situation was taking on everyone, made an unexpected decision. After a particularly moving therapy session where Amy expressed fear about losing either of her mothers, Patricia approached Rose with a proposal. Instead of pursuing criminal charges, she suggested they focus on creating a stable co-parenting arrangement. The suggestion caught Rose off guard. She had been preparing herself for the worst, jail time, losing Amy completely, watching her whole world crumble. Patricia's offer felt like the first ray of sunlight after a long storm. However, the decision wasn't entirely theirs to make. The criminal investigation had taken on a life of its own, with prosecutors eager to make an example of the trafficking ring. As autumn deepened, Amy's life fell into a new rhythm. She spent weekdays with Rose, maintaining her familiar routine of school and afternoons at the bookstore. Weekends were spent with Patricia, exploring museums, learning to ride a bike in the park, and slowly building their own traditions. Both mothers attended her school events, sitting separately but sharing proud smiles when Amy performed in the fall concert. The media's interest in the case had evolved from sensational headlines to more thoughtful pieces about modern family dynamics and the complexities of adoption. Local newspapers ran features on similar cases, highlighting the need for better regulation and support for families caught in such situations. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. A former employee of the adoption agency, motivated by Amy's story, came forward with detailed records. These documents proved that Rose had indeed been an unwitting participant in the scheme, having been carefully selected by the traffickers because of her genuine desire to adopt and her trusting nature. This revelation brought both relief and new pain. Rose's name was cleared of any wrongdoing, but the knowledge that she had been manipulated during what should have been one of the happiest moments of her life was difficult to process. Patricia, who had harbored lingering doubts about Rose's involvement, found herself feeling a surprising sense of kinship with the woman who had raised her daughter. As the third part of this ongoing story drew to a close, the approaching holiday season brought new challenges and opportunities. Both mothers began cautiously discussing how to handle celebrations, each wanting to create joyful memories for Amy while respecting the delicate balance they had achieved. The little girl, now more settled in her expanded family, had begun referring to them as Mama Rose and Mama Pat, creating her own solution to the complex situation. Her resilience and capacity for love continued to guide the adults around her toward a future none of them could have imagined just months before. In the quiet moments between the ongoing legal proceedings and daily routines, both mothers found themselves adapting to a new definition of family, one that put Amy's happiness at the center of every decision. The story had shifted from a battle for custody to a journey of healing, understanding, and the creation of something entirely new. The holiday season painted Boston in festive lights and gentle snowfall, bringing new challenges and unexpected moments of joy to Amy's unique family situation. December arrived with the promise of first Christmas celebrations together, though none of them quite knew how to navigate these uncharted waters. The bookstore had transformed into a winter wonderland, with Rose arranging special holiday story times that brought the community together. During one such evening, while Amy helped decorate the store's Christmas tree, Patricia unexpectedly walked in, carrying a box of handmade ornaments from her own childhood. The moment could have been awkward, but Amy's excitement at having both her mothers help her hang decorations broke through any tension. "Look, Mama Pat. Mama Rose taught me how to make paper snowflakes," Amy exclaimed, proudly holding up her creations. Patricia noticed how Rose had carefully laminated each one to preserve them, the kind of thoughtful detail that came from years of mothering. It was these small moments that continued to soften the edges of their complicated relationship. The criminal investigation into the trafficking ring had gained significant momentum. Detective Cooper's team had identified key players across 3 states, leading to several high-profile arrests. The former agency employee's testimony proved invaluable, exposing a network that had affected dozens of families over more than a decade. As the case unfolded, both Rose and Patricia found themselves giving depositions to help prosecute the real criminals. Sitting in different interview rooms on the same day, they shared their sides of a story that had intertwined their lives forever. Rose recalled the hope and joy she'd felt when first holding Amy, while Patricia described the 15 years of searching that had led to this moment. One snowy afternoon, during a therapy session with Dr. Zhang, Amy made a breakthrough of her own. Using her art supplies, she created a family tree unlike any other, one with 2 strong branches supporting her leaf in the middle. "See," she explained to Dr. Zhang, "both my mamas are like tree branches, keeping me safe and helping me grow." The drawing now hung in both homes, a child's perfect solution to an adult's complex problem. The approaching Christmas posed logistical and emotional challenges. Both mothers wanted to create special memories with Amy, but neither wanted to overwhelm her or create competition. It was Amy herself who provided the solution during one of their joint therapy sessions. "Can we have Christmas Eve at the bookstore with Mama Rose, and Christmas morning at the harbor with Mama Pat?" she suggested, clutching Mr. Hoppy close. "That way, Santa can find me at both houses." The simplicity and wisdom of her solution brought tears to both women's eyes. The holiday arrangements became a turning point in Rose and Patricia's relationship. While planning Amy's celebrations, they found themselves sharing stories about their own childhood Christmases. Patricia spoke about growing up in a traditional Chinese household where Christmas meant a fusion of Eastern and Western traditions, while Rose recalled her late husband's love for elaborate holiday decorations. Meanwhile, the criminal proceedings continued to reveal disturbing details about the trafficking operation. The organization had specifically targeted wealthy families for their infant children, while simultaneously identifying vulnerable potential adoptive parents who could provide loving homes, making detection of their crimes more difficult. The prosecutors built a strong case, but they needed both Rose and Patricia's testimony to secure convictions. The decision to testify would mean reliving painful memories and exposing their story to even more public scrutiny. However, both women recognized the importance of preventing other families from experiencing similar trauma. During this time, Amy's school life provided a welcome sense of normalcy. Her teacher, Mrs. Thompson, had handled the situation with remarkable sensitivity, helping other children understand Amy's unique family structure. When the class did a project about family traditions, Amy proudly shared stories from both her homes, her classmates accepting her explanation with the simple acceptance that children often show. One particularly cold evening, as Patricia was dropping Amy off at the bookstore, Rose invited her in for tea. It was a small gesture, but a significant one. As they sat among the shelves of books, watching Amy arrange her stuffed animals for a pretend story time, they found themselves talking not as adversaries or reluctant co-parents, but as two women who shared a profound love for the same child. The conversation turned to the upcoming trials, and Rose shared her fears about testifying. Patricia, drawing from her years of business experience, offered to help Rose prepare for the courtroom environment. This unexpected alliance brought a new dimension to their relationship, one built on mutual support rather than competition. The media, which had initially painted their story in black and white terms, began capturing the nuanced reality of their situation. A local reporter wrote a thoughtful piece about how they were redefining the meaning of family, inspiring other families in similar situations to seek collaborative solutions rather than adversarial ones. As Christmas approached, both homes buzzed with preparation. Rose taught Amy how to make her special hot chocolate recipe, while Patricia shared her family's tradition of making dumplings on Christmas Eve. The little girl absorbed these traditions with joy, creating her own unique blend of family customs. The bookstore's holiday story time became a community event, with Patricia sitting quietly in the back, watching Rose bring characters to life for a group of enchanted children. Amy, who knew all the stories by heart, would chime in with sound effects at just the right moments, bringing smiles to both her mother's faces. In quiet moments, both women found themselves reflecting on how far they had come from those first tense days in the courthouse. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more complex, a shared history that bound them together through their love for Amy. As the fourth part of their story drew to a close, the approaching Christmas promised to be unlike any other. In the window of the bookstore, paper snowflakes caught the light, some made by Rose, some by Patricia, and many by Amy, each unique but coming together to create something beautiful. It was, perhaps, the perfect metaphor for their evolving family story. The criminal trials loomed in the new year, but for now, they focused on creating joyful memories for Amy. The little girl continued to move between her two worlds with remarkable grace, her heart big enough to hold all the love that surrounded her. As the snow fell softly outside, she practiced her lines for the school holiday show, her two mothers watching with shared pride, their own relationship evolving into something neither could have imagined months before. The new year dawned with a mix of hope and apprehension as the criminal trials approached. January's bitter cold swept through Boston streets, matching the stern atmosphere of the courthouse where the trafficking rings case would finally be heard. The prosecution had built a solid case, with Rose and Patricia's testimonies serving as crucial pieces of the puzzle. The days leading up to the trial were filled with preparation. Patricia's corporate experience helped her maintain composure during mock testimonies, but Rose struggled with the prospect of reliving the moment she discovered her adoption journey had been built on lies. Amy, sensing the tension, began creating brave cards, little drawings she would give to both mothers each morning, featuring Mr. Hoppy in superhero poses. On the first day of the trial, the courthouse steps were crowded with media and supporters. Inside, the proceedings revealed the shocking scope of the trafficking operation. The prosecutors presented evidence of a decade-long scheme that had affected over 30 families across multiple states. Bank records showed millions of dollars changing hands, with elaborate networks of shell companies used to disguise the money trail. Rose's testimony came first. Dressed in a simple blue sweater that Amy had helped her choose, she took the stand and shared her story. Her voice trembled as she described her joy at being chosen as a mother, the loving home she had created for Amy, and the devastating moment she learned the truth. The jury listened intently as she detailed her interactions with the fake agency, identifying key players in the courtroom. During breaks in the proceedings, both mothers took turns staying with Amy, who remained at home with a trusted caregiver from her therapy center. They would video call during lunch breaks, watching as she showed them her latest art projects or demonstrated new dance moves she'd learned at school. These moments of normalcy helped ground them amid the emotional turbulence of the trial. Patricia's testimony followed days later. With the precision she was known for in business, she reconstructed the timeline of her daughter's disappearance. Her composed exterior cracked only once, when describing the years of searching and the birthdays spent wondering if her child was safe and loved. In that moment, she looked at Rose sitting in the gallery and added, "At least now I know she was." The trial unearthed more than just criminal activities. It revealed stories of other families affected by the trafficking ring, some who, like Patricia, had lost children, and others who, like Rose, had unknowingly participated in illegal adoptions. These revelations led to the creation of a support network, with families coming together to share resources and emotional support. Meanwhile, Amy's life continued its careful balance between two homes. Her school projects now often featured both her experiences, stories about weekend adventures with Patricia at the harbor mixed with tales of cozy evenings at the bookstore with Rose. Her teacher noted that she had become more outgoing, often helping new students feel welcome by sharing her unique perspective on family. One particularly significant evening, during a regular therapy session with Dr. Zhang, Amy asked if she could invite both her mothers to join. In the safe space of the therapy room, she shared her own handmade family book, filled with photos and drawings of both her homes, her school, and all the people she loved. The last page showed a drawing of herself holding hands with both mothers, with the words, "My special family," written in careful child's handwriting. The criminal trial continued through January, each day bringing new revelations. The prosecution presented evidence of how the trafficking ring had specifically targeted hospitals with weak security systems, and how they had carefully selected adoptive parents who would provide loving homes, a strategy that had helped them avoid detection for years. The defense attorneys tried to paint Rose as a willing participant, but her genuine distress and the overwhelming evidence of the ring's deception quickly dispelled these accusations. Patricia, watching from the gallery during these attempts, found herself feeling protective of the woman who had given her daughter such a loving foundation. Outside the courthouse, life took on its own rhythm. The bookstore hosted its first joint event, a Lunar New Year celebration where Patricia shared stories from her childhood while Rose organized craft activities. The community's response was overwhelmingly positive, with many regular customers commenting on how the store felt even more welcoming with the expanded family dynamic. Amy's resilience continued to amaze both her mothers and Dr. Zhang. During one session, she created a play about a butterfly with two gardens to visit, explaining matter-of-factly that the butterfly was lucky because it had twice as many flowers to enjoy. Her simple wisdom often provided perspective when adult complications threatened to overwhelm the situation. As the trial neared its conclusion, the prosecution presented their final piece of evidence, recordings of the trafficking ring's leaders discussing their operations. The casual way they spoke about separating families and falsifying documents sent shivers through the courtroom. Rose gripped Patricia's hand during this testimony, their shared pain bridging any remaining distance between them. The jury took 3 days to reach their verdict. When they returned, the courtroom was packed with affected families, reporters, and supporters. The guilty verdicts were read one by one, each count affirming that justice was finally being served. The ring's leaders faced decades in prison, while their various accomplices received sentences reflecting their levels of involvement. As February approached, bringing with it Amy's 6th birthday, both mothers began planning a joint celebration, something that would have seemed impossible months ago. The party would be held at the bookstore, with Patricia handling the catering and Rose managing the entertainment. Amy's excitement about having all her favorite people in one place was infectious. The 5th part of their story closed with a sense of justice served and healing begun. The criminal trial had exposed the dark truth behind their situation, but it had also highlighted the strength of their unusual family bond. As they left the courthouse for the last time, Amy's brave cards tucked safely in both their pockets, Rose and Patricia shared a look of understanding. They had emerged from the trial not just as co-parents, but as partners in protecting and nurturing the extraordinary little girl who had brought them together. The bookstore's lights glowed warmly in the winter evening, beckoning them home to where Amy waited with Mr. Hoppy and her latest art creation, a picture of a courthouse with a rainbow above it, symbolizing her simple but profound understanding that even the darkest clouds could bring beautiful things. As winter began to thaw into early spring, Amy's 6th birthday celebration marked a new chapter in their evolving family story. The bookstore had been transformed into an enchanted garden, with paper flowers climbing the bookshelves and twinkling lights creating a magical atmosphere. Rose's storytelling expertise and Patricia's organizational skills had combined to create something truly special. Children from Amy's class mixed with young patrons from the bookstore's reading groups, all of them caught up in the excitement of a party that seemed to have jumped straight out of a storybook. Amy, wearing a butterfly-themed dress that had been carefully chosen to match decorations in both her homes, flitted between her friends with infectious joy. The highlight of the celebration was a specially commissioned puppet show, where 2 butterfly mothers helped their caterpillar child grow and transform. The symbolism wasn't lost on the adults present, but for the children, it was simply a delightful story that had them giggling and clapping. Amy sat cross-legged at the front, Mr. Hoppy clutched to her chest, occasionally glancing back to make sure both her mothers were watching too. In the weeks following the trial's conclusion, the family had settled into a more comfortable routine. The media attention had finally begun to fade, allowing them to focus on building their future rather than revisiting their past. The story had evolved from a sensational headline into something more nuanced, a modern family finding its own path. One particularly significant development came when Patricia decided to renovate the space above her real estate office into a children's learning center, inspired by the community atmosphere of Rose's bookstore. She consulted with Rose on the project, recognizing her expertise in creating child-friendly spaces. The center would focus on art and storytelling, 2 things that had helped Amy process her own complex situation. Rose, meanwhile, had started a support group for families affected by adoption fraud, hosting monthly meetings in the bookstore's reading corner after hours. Patricia often attended these meetings, sharing her perspective and helping other families navigate the legal and emotional challenges they faced. Their story had become a beacon of hope for others in similar situations. Dr. Zhang continued to meet with Amy, though their sessions had become more about celebrating milestones than processing trauma. During one session, Amy created a family map showing all the different places and people that made up her world. The map included both homes, her school, the therapy office, and various other locations that had become significant in their journey. The spring brought new opportunities for family traditions. Amy's school science fair project about butterflies was supervised by Patricia, while Rose helped with the presentation design. When Amy won first place, both mothers sat together in the audience, their proud applause indistinguishable from each other's. Their story had begun to influence local adoption policies. The state legislature invited both Rose and Patricia to testify about their experience, using their case as an example of both what could go wrong in the adoption system and how families could find healing through cooperation rather than conflict. One sunny afternoon, as cherry blossoms began to bloom across Boston, Amy made an observation that captured the essence of their journey. While walking between her mothers in the park, each holding one of her hands, she said, "You know what's nice? Some kids only get one mom to love them, but I get two moms to love me twice as much." The statement, delivered with childlike simplicity, brought tears to both women's eyes. It reflected how far they had come from those first tense days in the courthouse, when love had felt like a finite resource they had to compete for. Now they understood that love could multiply rather than divide. Patricia's corporate board had initially been concerned about how the public situation might affect their business, but her handling of the case had actually strengthened her company's reputation. She began incorporating more family-friendly policies in her corporate structure, understanding firsthand the importance of supporting diverse family situations. Rose's bookstore had evolved too. The community that had rallied around her during the difficult times now celebrated the store's expanded role as a place where all kinds of families could find acceptance and understanding. She started a special collection of books about different family structures, helping other parents navigate complicated conversations with their children. Amy's school life provided constant reminders of how children could adapt to and accept complex situations. When asked to draw her family tree for a class project, she created an elaborate design that included both her mothers, the bookstore staff who had become like aunts and uncles, Patricia's business partners who always remembered her birthday, and of course, Mr. Hoppy, who had his own special branch. The arrival of spring also brought an unexpected opportunity. A local publisher, impressed by how their story had touched so many lives, approached Rose and Patricia about writing a children's book together. The project would tell their story from Amy's perspective, helping other children understand that families could come in all forms. As they collaborated on the book, both women found themselves revisiting their journey with new insights. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something meaningful, a testament to the power of putting a child's needs first and finding strength in unexpected places. The sixth part of their story drew to a close as Amy prepared for her first-grade graduation. Both mothers worked together to plan the perfect celebration, their coordination now natural and easy. The little girl who had brought them together had shown them that love wasn't a finite resource to be divided, but rather an expanding force that could bridge any gap. One evening, as they sat in the bookstore after hours, watching Amy arrange her stuffed animals for one of her famous puppet shows, Rose and Patricia shared a quiet moment of understanding. Their story hadn't ended when the trial concluded or when the media attention faded. Instead, it continued to evolve, showing others that family could be defined not by DNA or legal documents, but by the daily choice to love and support each other. As the spring sunlight filtered through the bookstore windows, casting warm patterns on the floor where Amy played, both mothers recognized that their unique family structure had become something beautiful, not despite its complications, but because of them. They had created a new kind of normal, one that put love and understanding at its center. The final chapter of their remarkable journey unfolded as summer approached, bringing with it a sense of completion and new beginnings. The children's book they had written together, Two Homes, One Heart, was set to launch at Rose's bookstore, telling their story through the eyes of a child who discovered that love could multiply in unexpected ways. The book launch event transformed the bookstore into a celebration of family diversity. Children sat cross-legged on colorful cushions while Amy, now a confident 6-year-old, helped Rose read the story to the gathered crowd. Patricia stood at the back, watching her daughter point out her favorite illustrations, her heart full at how far they had all come. Their story had caught the attention of child welfare organizations across the country. The unique way they had handled their situation, choosing cooperation over conflict, prioritizing their child's emotional well-being over personal grievances, became a model for other families facing similar challenges. Both Rose and Patricia found themselves being invited to speak at conferences about modern family dynamics and adoption reform. Amy's academic year was coming to an end, and her progress had exceeded everyone's expectations. Her teacher noted that she had become a natural mediator among her classmates, often helping other children find peaceful solutions to their disagreements. "She has a special way of seeing both sides of every situation," Mrs. Thompson commented during the final parent-teacher conference, which both mothers attended together. The therapy sessions with Dr. Zhang had evolved into monthly check-ins, more of a celebration of milestones than a necessity. During their last session before summer break, Amy created a special art piece she titled, "My Perfect World." It showed the bookstore and Patricia's penthouse connected by a rainbow bridge, with butterflies flying between them carrying messages of love. One particularly meaningful development came when Patricia decided to move her real estate office to a building just a few blocks from the bookstore. The decision wasn't just about convenience, it was a symbolic gesture of commitment to their shared family life. The new location included a special reading nook designed by Rose, where Amy could spend time after school. The Children's Learning Center above Patricia's office had become a success, offering programs that combined storytelling with art therapy. Rose's expertise in children's literature and Patricia's business acumen had created something unique, a space where children from all kinds of family situations could feel understood and supported. Summer brought new adventures as they planned their first family vacation together. After much discussion and plenty of input from Amy, they decided on a beach house that could accommodate all of them. The vacation would be another first, a chance to create memories as a complete family unit, away from the familiar routines of their daily lives. Their story had begun to influence local legislation. The state had implemented new regulations for adoption agencies, with stricter verification processes and better support systems for both birth and adoptive parents. Rose and Patricia's testimony had played a crucial role in highlighting the need for these changes. Amy's artwork now decorated both homes, butterfly drawings, family portraits, and countless stories she had written about her unique family. Mr. Hoppy, though a bit worn from countless journeys between houses, remained her constant companion, a symbol of the bridge between her two worlds. The community that had supported them throughout their journey celebrated their success. The bookstore's regular customers had watched Amy grow and thrive, while Patricia's business associates had witnessed a powerful example of how personal challenges could be transformed into opportunities for growth and change. During a quiet evening at the bookstore, as Amy arranged books for the next day's story time, Rose and Patricia found themselves reflecting on their journey. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had been transformed into something meaningful, a testament to the power of choosing love over anger, understanding over judgment. Their story had become more than just a unique custody arrangement or a resolved legal battle. It had evolved into an example of how families could adapt and grow, how love could expand to include unexpected connections, and how a child's well-being could guide adults toward their better selves. As summer bloomed in full force, they prepared for new adventures. Amy would start first grade in the fall, Patricia's learning center was expanding to include weekend programs, and Rose's bookstore had become a recognized haven for diverse families seeking understanding and support. The media's interest in their story had shifted from sensationalism to substance. Documentaries and articles now focused on the positive aspects of their journey, how they had created a new model of family, how they had turned a potentially devastating situation into an opportunity for growth, and how their choice to cooperate had benefited everyone involved. One particularly touching moment came during Amy's end-of-year school performance. As she stood on stage, delivering her lines with confidence, both her mothers sat in the audience, sharing proud smiles and quiet tears. The journey that had begun with tension and fear had transformed into something beautiful, a family built on understanding, respect, and an abundance of love. Their story's final chapter wasn't really an ending at all, but rather a new beginning. Amy continued to move between her two homes with joy rather than confusion, carrying pieces of both worlds with her. Rose and Patricia had found their rhythm as co-parents, their initial antagonism replaced by mutual respect and genuine friendship. The butterfly theme that had followed their journey took on new meaning as they watched Amy grow and thrive. Like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, their family had transformed into something unexpected and beautiful. The struggle that had brought them together had become the foundation for something stronger than any of them could have imagined. As the summer sun set over Boston Harbor, casting golden light across both the bookstore and Patricia's penthouse, their story stood as a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, understanding over judgment, and hope over hurt. Amy, playing in the bookstore's reading corner with Mr. Hoppy, was living proof that sometimes the most beautiful families were the ones that didn't follow any traditional pattern. Their journey had shown that family wasn't defined by DNA or legal documents alone, but by the daily choices to love, support, and understand each other. In the end, they had created something rare and precious, a family that had grown stronger through its challenges, richer through its complications, and more beautiful through its willingness to embrace the unexpected. The story of two mothers and one daughter had become a beacon of hope for others, proving that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. As they looked toward the future, they knew that their journey would continue to evolve, guided by the simple wisdom Amy had shared so many months ago, that love doesn't divide, it multiplies.